Hi guys, how are you doing? My name is Sebastian from techcentury and welcome to my full review of the LG G Flex 2. Just a few months after the release, the G Flex 2 has dropped in price over 50%. In this review, I'm trying to answer the question if this is the best smartphone money can buy for under $250 unlocked. When we first take a look at the aforementioned price of the G Flex 2, it has dropped from over $700 MSRP to now as low as $230 from Amazon.com in the US, and in Germany the price has dropped almost as much to 248 euros. Moving on to the specs, the G Flex 2 is still a high-end device in this regards, featuring a Snapdragon 810 8-core processor, a 5.5-inch Full HD OLED display that's curved, a 13-megapixel camera on the rear with laser autofocus and 4K video recording, as well as a 3000 mAh battery. In terms of storage and RAM, there are actually different configurations available. Most people will probably buy the 16GB version that features 2GB of RAM, which is also the one that I have right here, but there's also a 32GB version available that now bumps up the RAM to 3GB. In terms of design and construction, the G Flex 2 isn't really spectacular aside from the curved display. The entire smartphone is constructed out of plastic that doesn't feel cheap, but also not as premium as other smartphones in this price range, for example, like the Huawei Honor 7. The self-healing back was a big marketing gimmick, but in the end, it's just a good-looking back that doesn't really have any magical abilities. To me, the best design choice is the most obvious, and that's the curved screen. Not really in terms of how the smartphone looks, but actually more about how the smartphone feels in the hand. Because despite the 5.5-inch diagonal that is pretty big, the smartphone actually feels smaller due to the curve, and there's also less reflection and glare on the screen. The biggest disappointment for me of the G Flex 2 was the performance. While the controversial Snapdragon 810 processor is one of the fastest chipsets on paper, the everyday performance of the G Flex 2 started to disappoint after a few weeks. Especially the 2GB of RAM in combination with the LG skin seemed to be the bottleneck. And this resulted in a lot of lag, transitions not really working out, and that you even had to clear all the RAM in order to be able to play games. Overheating was at least not an issue for me. Far more positive than the performance is fortunately the display on the G Flex 2, but unfortunately it's not flawless either. So while the 1080p resolution of the G Flex 2 is not the highest that you can get anymore on a smartphone, to me it never felt too low. The OLED technology impressed me once again with deep blacks, high contrast and great viewing angles. The biggest downfall of the display though is the minimum brightness, because there's actually not a big difference between the minimum and the maximum brightness, and therefore especially at night the screen is just too bright, takes too much power and really blinds you. Fortunately, due to the fact that this smartphone is based on Android, there is actually a solution, an app called Night Screen, and this app also allows you to set an even lower minimum brightness than the G Flex itself. So this is a great solution also to save some battery, and I can highly recommend it. In terms of software, the G Flex 2 is running Android 5.1 with a custom LG skin. Unfortunately, this LG skin doesn't really offer any benefit, and it really just slows down the phone overall. So I quickly installed the Google Now launcher, which is at least the best solution right out of the box. But still I would wish that it came with stock Android, and unfortunately there's no information whether this smartphone will ever see Android 6.0. Another negative aspect of the G Flex 2 is the speaker that's decent but nothing spectacular. It's a mono speaker on the back, and that basically sums up how it sounds. But now let's move on to more positive aspects of the phone, and those are the cameras. While you had to purchase an iPhone for years to get a good smartphone camera, the G Flex 2 shows that times have changed. The 30 megapixel shooter with laser autofocus exceeded my expectation in any aspect and never let me down. Especially the HDR feature delivered great results, and I took hundreds of pictures with the G Flex 2 that constantly impressed me. Unfortunately, there's another downfall though, because while it offers 4K video, my experience with it was pretty bad because the footage was very choppy with low frame rates, no matter if I recorded to the internal or the external storage. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about the battery life. Unfortunately, this is another negative aspect of the G Flex 2. In my experience, after a couple of months with the smartphone, I ended up having to recharge it at least twice a day. So once at night and once during the day. At least fast charging made this process quicker, but still for me as a heavy user, the battery life was pretty disappointing. Your mileage may vary though if you're a lighter user. So now it's time for my verdict. And while I mentioned a lot of negative aspects here in this video review, I'm still very impressed with the G Flex 2, and it's still one of my favorite smartphones of all time. The curved screen makes it look and feel unique and an incredible value for the price. In addition to that, the G Flex 2 is probably the smartphone that I had that gathered the most attention anywhere I went. I always got asked, what is this kind of smartphone? Who is it from? And is this really curved? And it's just a great experience to use it overall. Despite the downfalls, I think it's certainly one of the best, if not the best smartphone that you can get for less than $250 unlocked, and I can highly recommend it. If you use the G Flex 2, I really want to hear how your experiences are. Maybe they are different with the 3GB of RAM version in terms of performance. I just felt like 2GB are not enough. So this wraps up my full review of the G Flex 2 after using the smartphone for 4 months. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to subscribe for many more reviews, as well as like this video. It really helps me out. See you next time.